File 16 of a Treatise of Human Nature by David Hume, Volume 1. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by George Yeager, Book 1, Part 3 of Knowledge and Probability, Section 1 of Knowledge. There are 7, see Part 1, Section 5, different kinds of philosophical relation, that is, resemblance, identity, relations of time and place, proportion in quantity or number, degrees in any quality, contrariety, and causation. These relations may be divided into 2 classes, into such as depend entirely on the ideas which we compare together, and such as may be changed without any change in the ideas. It is from the idea of a triangle that we discover the relation of equality, which its 3 angles bear to 2 right ones, and this relation is invariable as long as our idea remains the same. On the contrary, the relations of contiguity and distance betwixt 2 objects may be changed merely by an alteration of their place, without any change on the objects themselves or on their ideas, and the place depends on 100 different accidents which cannot be foreseen by the mind. It is the same case with identity and causation. 2 objects, though perfectly resembling each other, and even appearing in the same place at different times, may be numerically different. And as the power by which one object produces another is never discoverable merely from their idea, it is evident cause and effect are relations of which we receive information from experience, and not from any abstract reasoning or reflection. There is no single phenomenon, even the most simple, which can be accounted for from the qualities of the objects as they appear to us, or which we could foresee without the help of our memory and experience. It appears, therefore, that of these 7 philosophical relations, there remain only 4 which, depending solely upon ideas, can be the objects of knowledge and certainty. These 4 are resemblance, contrariety, degrees in quality, and proportions in quantity or number. 3 of these relations are discoverable at first sight, and fall more properly under the province of intuition than demonstration. When any objects resemble each other, the resemblance will at first strike the eye, or rather the mind, and seldom requires a second examination. The case is the same with contrariety, and with the degrees of any quality. No one can once doubt but existence and non-existence destroy each other, and are perfectly incompatible and contrary. And though it be impossible to judge exactly of the degrees of any quality, such as color, taste, heat, cold, when the difference betwixt them is very small, yet it is easy to decide that any of them is superior or inferior to another when their difference is considerable. And this decision we always pronounce at first sight, without any inquiry or reasoning. We might proceed after the same manner in fixing the proportions of quantity or number, and might at one view observe a superiority or inferiority betwixt any numbers or figures, especially where the difference is very great and remarkable. As to equality or any exact proportion, we can only guess at it from a single consideration, except in very short numbers, or very limited portions of extension, which are comprehended in an instant, and where we perceive an impossibility of falling into any considerable error. In all other cases, we must settle the proportions with some liberty, or proceed in a more artificial manner. I have already observed that geometry, or the art by which we fix the proportions of figures, though it much excels both in universality and exactness the loose judgments of the senses and imagination, yet never attains a perfect precision and exactness. Its first principles are still drawn from the general appearance of the objects, and that appearance can never afford us any security when we examine the prodigious minuteness of which nature is susceptible. Our ideas seem to give a perfect assurance that no two right lines can have a common segment. But if we consider these ideas, we shall find that they always suppose a sensible inclination of the two lines, and that where the angle they form is extremely small, we have no standard of a right line so precise as to assure us of the truth of this proposition. It is the same case with most of the primary decisions of the mathematics. There remain, therefore, algebra and arithmetic as the only sciences in which we can carry on a chain of reasoning to any degree of intricacy, and yet preserve a perfect exactness and certainty. We are possessed of a precise standard by which we can judge of the equality and proportion of numbers, and according as they correspond or not to that standard, we determine their relations without any possibility of error. When two numbers are so combined as that the one has always a unit answering to every unit of the other, we pronounce them equal. And it is for want of such a standard of equality in extension that geometry can scarce be esteemed a perfect and infallible science. But here it may not be amiss to obviate a difficulty which may arise from my asserting that though geometry falls short of that perfect precision and certainty which are peculiar to arithmetic and algebra, yet it excels the imperfect judgments of our senses and imagination. The reason why I impute any defect to geometry is because its original and fundamental principles are derived merely from appearances, and it may perhaps be imagined that this defect must always attend it, and keep it from ever reaching a greater exactness in the comparison of objects or ideas than what our eye or imagination alone is able to attain. I own that this defect so far attends it as to keep it from ever aspiring to a full certainty. But since these fundamental principles depend on the easiest and least deceitful appearances, they bestow on their consequences a degree of exactness of which these consequences are singly incapable. It is impossible for the eye to determine the angles of a chiliagon to be equal to 1,996 right angles, or make any conjecture that approaches this proportion. But when it determines that right lines cannot concur, that we cannot draw more than one right line between two given points, its mistakes can never be of any consequence. And this is the nature and use of geometry, to run us up to such appearances as by reason of their simplicity cannot lead us into any considerable error. I shall here take occasion to propose a second observation concerning our demonstrative reasonings, which is suggested by the same subject of the mathematics. It is usual with mathematicians to pretend that those ideas which are their objects are of so refined and spiritual a nature, that they fall not under the conception of the fancy, but must be comprehended by a pure and intellectual view, of which the superior faculties of the soul are alone capable. The same notion runs through most parts of philosophy, and is principally made use of to explain our abstract ideas, and to shew how we can form an idea of a triangle, for instance, which shall neither be an isosceles nor scalenom, nor be confined to any particular length and proportion of sides. It is easy to see why philosophers are so fond of this notion of some spiritual and refined perceptions, since by that means they cover many of their absurdities, and may refuse to submit to the decisions of clear ideas, by appealing to such as are obscure and uncertain. But to destroy this artifice, we need but reflect on that principle so oft insisted on, that all our ideas are copied from our impressions. For from thence we may immediately conclude, that since all impressions are clear and precise, the ideas which are copied from them must be of the same nature, and can never, but from our fault, contain anything so dark and intricate. An idea is by its very nature weaker and fainter than an impression, but being in every other respect the same, cannot imply any very great mystery. If its weakness render it obscure, it is our business to remedy that defect as much as possible by keeping the idea steady and precise, and till we have done so, it is in vain to pretend to reasoning and philosophy. End of File 16.